Last brain petal, last lobe that we're going to talk about is what you see in the back here in purple. It's called your occipital lobe. So your occipital lobe is the most posterior part of your brain, the back of the brain, and it's the home of primary visual cortex, or most things visual. So it's where individuals who are sighted encode basic level information about anything they see. So we'll talk about this a lot more in the next chapter on sensation and perception, which I'm pretty excited about how visual information is taken in by our eyes. It travels to this back of the brain, this part of the cortex, so our brain can start to make sense of it. So the occipital lobe figures out basic level things. So whereas here we talked about, categorizing things like faces or scenes, the occipital lobe figures out things like, okay, what's the contrast level of this image? How easily can you distinguish different parts of the image? Or if there are a bunch of lines, what direction are the lines oriented? Or if there's an object, where are the edges of the object at? As you move a little bit closer to the front, you see things like, or you start to encode things like what colors are involved in an image. So these are more basic properties of vision. And as you start to make out what an object is, where its lines are, what its contrast is, what colors it has, then you start to travel into this what pathway towards the temporal lobe into actually categorizing it, which is kind of cool. So yeah, the occipital lobe is just kind of the basic vision area. Now, this is something that helped me when I was first learning about the brain, because at first when you see all this, it might be like a ton of information and you might have trouble kind of recognizing or remembering the organization, what's doing what. So thankfully there is kind of some organization to where these regions are. So notice that as you move forward, as you move anterior or to the front of the brain, your functions become more complex and higher level. So things like these decision-making, attention, planning, or figuring out object categorization, things in the front tend to be more complex. Whereas as you move backwards, as you move posterior to the back of the brain, things become more basic and more primitive. So, we talked about occipital lobe being just basic visual information. That holds true to the cerebellum and the brainstem as well, because things like just movement or heart rate are things that evolutionarily are pretty primitive to other species as well. But as you move forward, you start to get to more of those complex advanced processes that humans are more known for. So this doesn't hold perfectly true, but as a rule of thumb, if you had to guess what brain regions do, think of higher level functions as in the front and lower level functions as in the back.